We are back on Play It Forward with Heather Donnell, filmmaker, writer, director, producer. The film we're talking about today is What You Will, Heather. Thank
Yes.
you for being on the show. Thanks so much. Would you like to introduce yourself and or the film before we start?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to talk about my work. I am first and foremost a screenwriter. So I started writing screenplays maybe in, 2007, and I really got caught up in that. But I think everyone here knows screenwriting and any kind of writing is pretty solitary. And so when I started collaborating with actors and then started interacting with people on set, that just lit me up like no other feeling. And so it was very, very exciting to work on my own projects with a small crew. I usually do micro budget films, and I've done 10 shorts and a feature.
Wow.
So yeah, I lived in the Bay Area and not in Los Angeles. And so there was a very nice community that was tight knit and small. There are things that are shot in the Bay Area, but not as much as, in LA. And so everyone knows everyone there. And so it just felt very cozy to get the crew together that I wanted and to go out and kind of do a little guerrilla style filmmaking. Over the years, we got some amazing, beautiful shots that if we had had a crew of 200 people, we wouldn't have been able to get. So we just had so much fun. And my goal was always to build up my skills to do a feature film. So every short that I did before the feature was in service of learning something new, like how to do a night shoot, how to do an overnight shoot,
Mm.
uh, all kinds of things that I always worked with the same people, all kinds of things that we wanted to learn together. So it was a great practice run at the same time that we were able to make beautiful films that got into lots of festivals, and we just had a good time, but we were always going to the feature. And then we shot the feature in 18 days, micro budget, and it was just the best thing I've ever done, seriously,
Wow.
to this day.
Wow,
Um,
that's awesome. I
yeah,
definitely can relate to a lot of that. I mean, when we were talking part of the show, you said you felt like an outside filmmaker, an outsider to filmmaking. I totally do too. And the fact, and what you've summarized is so great to anybody who feels like an outsider or an insider. They went to school or they're trying to get in wherever they are in the life cycle of it. Just to feel like a filmmaker is so important. And that really comes with just making films.
yeah,
And the fact that you found a crew and you stuck with these people and everybody gets to know one another, trust one another, develop together, and is learning together is such an important thing because, you don't have to pretend. And that
yeah,
takes so much out of the guesswork and out of the ego, and you can just focus on the creation of the art. And I think it's a great, great tip to anybody watching the shows. Hey, just get out there, find people that you feel comfortable with, that you don't have to pretend with, keep making films, film after film. Don't have to worry about raising a lot of money. Go out, cobble a little bit of together, and it's really about the investment of your sweat equity. I mean, that's what it is. And that's the case in any art. You whether you're writing, music, painting, you're taking your time and your growth and putting it into it. And that's really the way it should be.
yeah. And it's exciting. I love film so much because it is so collaborative. And to really make a great film, you have to have a great community. And so I always feel like, you can see on screen kind of the heart and soul. I can see anyway, the heart and soul that goes into it. And I feel like that is everyone from the PA who is interning to, the composer and the actors. I really love being with a creative community, and film is kind of a pressure cooker.
Yeah,
And you spend 14 hours a day with people on set. And if
for
you're
sure.
not, as intimate with them as you're going to be with most other people, I don't know another form of art. Like music is one thing, but art for film encompasses so many disciplines, like
Yeah.
costume designers, like talking about fabrics
Right.
and
Right.
like the specialization and craftsmanship of the knowledge is, it just blows my mind all the time. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
amazing. I love hearing creative ideas from other people. As the director, I always have a vision, but then it is so fun for me to say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. And then to have someone like a set designer say, what kind of font for the menus do you want?
Right. It's great. It's really a special thing to have that team where you're like clicking with and you're like, oh wow, that's great. Okay, it feels like that font should be XYZ, and you get to talk, and it further reinforces your vision, and it's such a honor to have people work together on a vision that everybody's really collaborating. To our first question, Heather, What You Will is a short film about interesting love triangle quadrangle thing going on, rectangle,
I like,
and yeah, yeah. So, um, and the first question, and so really to let people know that this is not necessarily your straightforward love affair. It seems like this old couple is reunited, and this other guy is saying, "Hey, I'm gonna go with this way. It's not the way in the direction this." And then there's this fourth person who's watching this thing, and it gets kind of ugly, and then she ends up hiding something from the guy who this and that and the other. So it's kind of messy.
yeah.
And I'm sure oftentimes, um, it seems like a very young love thing, right? That's a younger side of passion and lust and love, and where does all that
Mhm.
fit in? It's kind of dirty, not clean or straightforward.
Mhm.
Um, that said, where did your you know, pre-thought, if you could get to it, that impulse of a feeling that said, hey, I want to explore this topic, I want to write about this topic, come from for you?
Well, I feel like I'll just speak for myself, but I'm wondering if you had any feelings conjured up from watching this film, because for me, the feeling came from, yes, young love, that confusion and excitement and that desire that is so strong. Yes, I have had that. It has led me astray. It has led me into areas where I probably shouldn't have gone, but it's brought me, a lot of passion as well. And I feel like we all have that if you've had any kind of series of relationships. It's something that happens. And then when you're a little bit older and you look back, it's hard to look back at yourself with compassion. But that's what I was trying to do with this film, is to think about my past love affairs with compassion and kind of reflect on, you know, this confusion that I had, or the, some might say, wrong choices, um, were for a very, very good reason. I had my reasons at the time, and
Yeah.
life is lived forward, but understood backwards. And so this for me is kind of looking back. But may I
Mm.
ask you, is there
Please.
anything that you felt when you were watching it? Was there anything that conjured up some old uh love affairs or feelings even?
Well, when I watched the movie, I really am preparing to speak to you about it. And so I'm preparing to understand the movie and really understand the narrative. So I'm looking at the narrative arc. What is the narrative arc doing? And what is it communicating? What story is it telling? So very basically, what story is being said, and what are the themes, and what are the messages? So my personal, um, I think uh, there's probably a certain amount of unresolved or frustration that it conjured up in me, and I think That probably has to do with the lies that are being told throughout. And I think that's also why you use the term that young love,
Mhm.
because there's nothing wrong with lust if it's on the table. There's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with um, being in love if that's on the table. And if there's a discrepancy between the two, as long as both parties or however many parties come to the bedroom are honest about it,
Mhm.
then there's no confusion. But
Mhm.
when you start using people in a way to, whether you're trying to validate your own insecurity and have another person, validate yourself
Mhm.
sexually, and
Mhm.
because you need that, or you're using a person for their body, whatever that might be.
Mhm.
When those things aren't expressed, there's always you're carrying baggage, and that baggage is, you're adding to the baggage.
Mhm.
So, with those actions,
Mhm.
so that's my take on the film and on what's going on with the dynamics, and um, that's how do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I would invite you to include in your category of lies, because there is a lot of, I would call it cover up. But I think ultimately it's about self-deception. And I feel like the real struggle for this young woman, and it was definitely the case for me, was to come out from underneath a deception of, an illusion I'm casting or projecting onto another person, or hearing what I want to hear, or, manipulating the situation to get what I want. Like, all of that is at the root of self-deception. And I feel like that complicates so many things, but it does make life interesting.
You know, I'm glad that you further, grounded it in that level of self-deception, because that is, where lies come from, really. Where externalizing their, we're always telling them to ourselves in some way, even justifying that, we're lying to others. So, and that's what happens, even if we knowingly are telling a lie, there is some, this inherent self-deception. Like, I remember I was teaching school once, and this kid asked me, she was, I don't know, a teenager. She was like, she was nice. They're all nice kids, but I was like, look, don't get into it with this other person. Just don't start throwing attitude back. And she was very sincerely, she was like, why? And at the time, I didn't give her an answer. I was like, it's just it's not. You don't want to do it. But the reason is because we're all connected, and
Mm.
it's you do it to her, you're internalizing that in some way. You're saying that's
Mm.
okay. You're validating that emotion in yourself and treating yourself in some way that way.
Absolutely.
um so that said, we've kind of covered the next question, which is, what's the takeaway? And I think if we haven't covered it, at least we've set up a good, framework for it when you're engaged in that self-deceptive behavior to validate what you want. Except,
Mhm.
what you want to think about yourself, or this object that you want. What is our way out of that? How do we
Mhm.
mature as humans out of that
Mhm.
to um uh a more, enlightened place of living and being?
Yeah, exactly. And that is why I hard cut the ending where I did. It's because I do want to leave that question of, the reaction to the film has been super interesting. On one hand, this is the quote end of the movie, right? But she is left with a choice, and there have been a lot of reactions like, well, what happens next? Is she going? Is she not going? And she could end it right there with the movie, or she could continue on a cycle of likely self-deception, or is that a new beginning? So for me as a filmmaker, the importance of the takeaway for me is that there is a choice. Like, I feel like I know that when I was young, I felt completely compelled by my passions. And you just have to have this person, or you just have to get this, certain relationship, quote, fixed. And it's like, no, there are a myriad of things that can happen. And it's hard to see that when you're young. It's easier when you're a little older and you're like, wow, that could have gone a bunch of different ways. I felt like I was locked in. And that's not true. So I want like a widening of the worldview that you can have, the possibilities available. I mean, that is our job as artists, is to show the vastness of the imagination in the entire world, not just in your imagination, but reality. In reality, things can go so many different ways based on how you are and the kind of person you are and the understanding you have of yourself and your identity and how you want to be in the world. You have a choice, and you don't need to be driven by the river of your emotions, even though it's important to listen to those.
Well said. Absolutely, Heather. That's awesome. Super important. Awareness begins with realizing that there's a choice for consciousness and stepping back to see that um, lens through that greater awareness. How did you do it in your life? How were you able to step back and make those choices?
Well, it took a few cycles, I have
Yeah.
to say. And that's one of the reasons I wanted their relationship, the couple's relationship, to be like a long-standing one of friendship, of sometimes lovers, sometimes, never talking, because I feel like life isn't really a romantic comedy, even though I enjoy those. It's much, much longer. And your learning and your self-growth and awareness and understanding take a long time. At least it did for me. I was not a fast learner. I was a let's learn things the hard way a few times and then I'll get it. So I think time is the most important
Mm,
element, and also intention. Like, I am hoping, for me, this girl in this story is slowly waking up. That's
mhm,
my hope.
mhm, mhm.
And since you were, I think, a theater aficionado, um, you must know that What You Will is a subtitle of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. And I love, that's my favorite Shakespeare play. And and that's about love, that's about relationships, that's about identity, that's about mistaken identity, it's about deception, to try and get what you want. And I like it. Twelfth Night is a comedy. And I like to imagine, even though, life does not always go this way, I like to imagine that people are inching towards a more harmonious resolution. It doesn't have to be all wrapped up with a bow. But even though I love super dark films, like I just saw Saltburn, for example, and I truly admire Emerald Farrell, that's not the kind of art that I'm going to make. I love to watch it and think about it, but I'm not going to make that kind of art. To me, I want to see characters on a journey, however slow, just becoming more and more whole, becoming more and more conscious.
That's great. I can definitely appreciate that mission and journey and intention as a filmmaker, an artist, as well as, a person in the act of doing that. And time is super important. And, I think, for me, as I reflect, how do you overcome making the same errors that you did in the past? And one way is, well, you repeat it enough until the pain becomes so great that you realize, well, there's got to be another way out of this. And often uh, it's, acknowledging what is happening what you're doing it, why is it you're doing it, and that, maybe there's another way to get what it is that you think you need.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
I love the way you put that. Yeah.
thanks, Heather. Heather, Donald, last question on Play It Forward is, how have you been personally changed since making What You Will?
Oh, well, I think that for me, I made this film right after the worst of the pandemic was over. We had all been double vaxxed. We still had to do COVID protocols on set, which was tough. But coming out of the pandemic, I just was craving, that collaboration. I was craving being on set. And honestly, it reaffirmed my true joy is in working with other artists and learning from them and creating something beautiful together. And so it was a reaffirmation. And that's how I was changed. And this was a way for me to exit out of the pandemic and feel like, okay, I'm back.
Got it. Got it. That help keep you focused on what's important.
Mhm.
And that's great. Heather Donnell, filmmaker, writer, director, producer, thank you so much for being on Play It Forward today.
Thank you. I had such a great time.
You're sweet. All right, everybody. Bye. Play It Forward next time. Peace.